Hey there, I'm Taz Singh, and I've been working with communities for as long as I can remember. Fundamentally, communities are made up of people, so this is my journey going to those communities and talking to those people. Come along with me. Amazing, I'm back, and today I got Matt Biilmann with me. So Matt's the CEO of Netlify. If you haven't used Netlify before, I love it. It's kind of revolutionized the ease of software development for me. And so today we have Matt to kind of talk to you about his inspiration, starting Netlify, kind of his background, coming from, like the tech world, especially over in Europe, and kind of how like all of those things inspired him to start Netlify. So without further ado, Matt, yeah. So you're from Denmark, Copenhagen, Denmark.
Yeah. Yes.
And it's a beautiful city. If I've been to Copenhagen, absolutely love Copenhagen.
Go in the summer though.
Also love going to Malmo. Malmo is also,
nice.
also quite nice,
Yeah.
and like that whole region is just beautiful. So like being such a nice city, how come you left Copenhagen?
A girl was involved, so I was actually like in a completely different career path back then. I studied musicology, comparative literature.
Oh wow!
Started a major in cultural studies while working as a musical journalist for the Danish radio. Met a girl from Spain. Went to see her. She came to see me. I went a little more to Spain. I decided, okay, I'm gonna go for like 3 months to Spain and finish up my thesis in cultural study. And fairly quickly realized, okay, I'm gonna stick around in Spain for some more, and also realized that there wasn't a big market for writing about music in Danish in Madrid at the time, surprisingly.
Who would have guessed, right?
Yeah, it took me by surprise, right? Like, so I had to come up with a plan B, and then I'm fortunate in that I've been programming computers since I was 10 years old and got my first Commodore 64. It was always my passion, and there's something I combined with some of the stuff I did in music and journalism and so on. So when I got to Spain, I relatively quickly managed to make that career, and actually in a span of a couple of years went from like starting a job as a senior engineer to tech director to CTO of the company I worked for at the time.
Oh wow, okay. Is that where you kind of like started to kind of build this inspiration then?
Yeah, I would say that company was really important for what I did then, because that was the first company where I really started building tooling for developers and for the web, right? Like, so we were the company as such was offering small to medium businesses all over Europe to sort of just take care of their whole online presence, right? Like, so we had a large network of freelance designers that would do the design work. We had in-house content team, support team, a large sales team, project management team, and build around 100 websites a week for small to medium businesses in Europe, tens of thousands in total, right?
That's a lot of websites.
Yeah, so I led the product and engineering organization that built the platform that we used to build and ship and operate all of those websites, right? Like, we had like the network of freelance designers would come in and use that platform to do the actual designs and so on. The customers would use the platform for content editing and content management and e-commerce management, everything like that. And it would power the hosting of every single project all the way from initial brief into production hosting, right? And we built a couple of different iterations of that platform, and then decided that we would spin off a startup based on taking the experience of building these different iterations of the platform and build a cloud-hosted multi-tenant platform for building and operating websites with the same efficiencies that we had internally.
Right.
So I ended up starting that in Madrid together with the founders of the Spanish company.
Oh wow.
And then came to the Bay Area to Silicon Valley, working on that.
So I'm going to ask you the same. Madrid's such a lovely city. What made you leave Copenhagen and then leave Madrid to come to the Bay Area? I mean, come on.
So I left. So it was my.
And don't tell me it's going to be another girl.
No. This time it was a co-founder. So this time it was my Spanish co-founder.
It was basically another partner,
right? Like. So my co-founder Julio at the time went on a tour of the Bay Area and Silicon Valley with the Spanish Chambers of Commerce, and he came back from that tour, and it was like he walked straight to me from the airport and was like, Matthias, we have to go to San Francisco. And at that time, it was not something I had considered, right? It sort of came out of the blue. I barely knew which coast San Francisco was on. It was like, sounds like a really interesting idea. And he was just like, you just have to go see for yourself. Like, just do this. Go there for 3 months on a tourist visa, work from there on our startup, and then come back and tell me if we have to go. It's like, okay, sounds like, why not? Right?
Sure. Yeah.
So I went to San Francisco for 3 months, worked from here, saw the whole ecosystem, especially around developer tools and pushing the edge in that. And I came back and I told Julio, yeah, you're right, we have to go.
Yeah.
And then we started the whole process of getting visas, of getting the company set up in the right way.
Yeah. I'm curious, like was that whole visa process difficult? I assume it was, right? Because a lot of people come over here, like essentially to the U.S. and I guess the same with Canada, that like a company sponsors them. But you're coming here to start a company,
yes.
So you arguably don't have a company to sponsor you because you're literally going there to start one. Are you on a special type of visa then, like an O1B or something?
I've been on pretty much all types of visas.
All types of visas, all of them.
I finally got a green card at the end of 2019 after a green card process that meant that from until I got it, there was an almost 2-year period where I could barely leave the US without special permission, without losing my status and so on.
Oof.
So finally, end of 2019, I got my green card and was like, now I'm going to travel a lot. And then 2020 happened.
There you go, everyone. Even the CEO of Netlify has visa issues. If you feel like it's just for you, even Matt here.
It's a really hard process. It's a really hard process, and there's a lot of hoops to navigate, and that was a long process, right? Like everything about starting something from the ground up is like a lot of grueling work, a lot of hurdles you have to overcome, and so on, right?
So the company you had in Madrid is what you kind of brought over here to the Bay Area. And then that's what became Netlify.
I worked on that from here and built a customer base there. Julio and I ended up splitting ways at the same time. We back in Madrid, in the Spanish company, we had also started a community of designers. Since we had all this network of freelance designers doing the design work, we started this community site for creatives called domestica.org. And that kept growing and growing on its own. So Julio decided to go focus his attention on that. I took over Webpop, the cloud platform we had started building together. And I was working on that and proud of what I built there, but I got the sense that the fundamental architecture of the web was about to change from a world where every service, every web application, every website, every store tended to be like one monolithic application with templates, plugins, business logic, data access, all grouped together. And I started really believing that we would move in a direction where all the back-end business logic would split into these different, clearly defined APIs and services, and the web UI layer would split onto its own thing.
Right.
So I started really thinking about, if that's true, how would a platform for that web UI layer look like, and what would it take to make it really easy and viable for developers to work with that architectural approach of decoupling, right?
Yeah.
Build a small MVP based on the infrastructure I already had from my previous startup called BitBalloon, where you could sort of very easily drag a folder with a front-end site onto bitballoon.com. It would go live on a URL.
Interesting, yep.
You added a CLI for doing CLI-based deploy there, had some of the initial components of like every deploy was atomic, it had its own URL, you could do instant rollbacks and so on.
Wow.
Started getting traction from the right kind of early adopters that just verified the idea that this architectural shift, it was bound to happen. And then started reaching out to one of my best friends back from Denmark, Chris, who joined me as a co-founder.
Oh, nice.
And who was sitting at the time as a partner and chief digital officer of a larger full service agency, and just talked to him through this whole architectural shift and what I thought it would mean for like the ability to build better performance, better user experiences, more reliable sites, better global scalability, and so on.
It's some serious foresight you had there. Wow.
Yeah, that was the fortune we had, right? Like we turned out to really be right around like that development. And when we started talking, we just really started talking about like, okay, for a real like team of web developers right now, what would it take to actually adopt this way of building? And at the time, it was like really cumbersome. You had to stitch together all these different services, workflows, CI/CD, edge hosting, like. So we came up with like the core concept of Netlify, of taking that whole deployment layer and building a workflow layer also that tied into your Git-centric workflow and really allowed everything to just like allowed developers to just work on the code, and we would take the rest from there. And then launched out of private beta in March 2015.
Oh, wow. Okay,
just the two of us bootstrapping, right?
Oh, wow. Yep.
By the end of 2015, we were serving around 250 million web requests out of our home-built edge network for customers like Sequoia Capital, WeWork, the Malala Foundation, and so on. And we were still just two people bootstrapping at that point and running out of voices to make when people called to talk with that dedicated account manager and so on.
But I guess like at the end of the day, like, you know, like I often talk about essentially being the snowplow. You have a road of snow that needs to be plowed, and really, like as a founder, you are that snowplow. You are defining the path down that road, plowing the path, and then hopefully in the future finding other snowplows that kind of like essentially follow the path that you've plowed. Is that kind of what you were facing? That you were kind of had all these different things that were going on, all these different things that we're doing, but you intimately understood all of them. You intimately kind of knew like how to plow that road, and then you can kind of find people to kind of like slot in to kind of take those things over.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I was lucky that I had like really worked at that time at every layer of the stack, from like very low level. Like, I mean, as we built out the first version of Netlify, I built all the SSH key management in like C++ to power the edge network, but I also built, you know, the CSS and the JavaScript on the front end and everything in between, right? Like, as well as the infrastructure automation.
You're basically a very large snowplow.
So I think I was fortunate in that I had like a very had exposure to a very broad area of the stack, all the way from when I was a teenager and had a hobby of building print etching print plates for like hardware to building like cloud infrastructure and front end frameworks, right? And I think that was part of what like gave me the opportunity of really seeing like how would a product look like that very tightly incorporates that whole infrastructure layer, CI/CD layer, and so on, but does it for people that works on that front end layer, right? Like, and then when we started like really getting traction, we raised our first seed round at the start of 2016. Hired the first developers in March 2016. And then really started building teams around these different units, right? Like, and of course, now it's a very different role I'm in terms of more setting the strategy and looking for what's the next big things that will happen as the modern web evolves, and what's our role in that, and what's not our role in that, which is often just as important question to answer from a founder.
There's maybe two things which personally impressed me with Netlify. One of them is preview environments. I think that was revolutionary. The first time I saw that working on Netlify, the first time I've used Netlify and kind of saw preview environments, it was literally revolutionary. So that was one thing. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, recently you acquired acquired a GraphQL company.
Yeah, OneGraph.
And I think that's kind of that next thing which really impressed me is kind of again the foresight and kind of the vision there to invest in that space and kind of say this is kind of the next generation of things that I'm assuming you want to work on.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we think that one of the next just barriers to developers building in the space, like Netlify has always just been about reducing the friction, right? Like how do we make it simpler to write the code and then not deal with all the other stuff that's not where you add value as a developer, right? And I think as we've seen this thesis of the web UI decoupling from the backend and the backend splitting into like a lot of composable services, we've also seen that the next area of friction becomes now every project relies on 4, 5, 6 different APIs and services.
Yeah.
And for every one of those as a developer, you have to take a lot of decisions. You have to figure out like, what is that service's way of issuing access token and authenticating and so on? Where do I need to store token secrets? How do I implement like refresh tokens or things like that? And where in the stack should that live? Which SDK for talking to their API should I pull in? And how does their API even work and so on, right?
Yeah.
And you get a lot of work just writing a lot of like glue code that's not essential to what you're actually building, right? Like, but that's just essential to tying these different services together.
100%, yeah.
And that's where we think that we have a huge opportunity of reducing the friction again by saying like, what if we can take care of managing all those connections, all those API tokens and so on?
Yeah.
And what if we can give you just a built-in GraphQL endpoint for any website you build with Netlify, where you can talk to the APIs and services you've enabled in a consistent way, right? Like, and with a consistent Graph Explorer and so on. So it's still in the early days. We have for Netlify Graph in public beta, just about to come out with the second iteration on the UI for that has some really exciting innovations in how easy we can make it to like onboard, experiment, and so on. But it's obviously a start of a much longer journey towards really solving this problem of how do we connect the web UI to all your different APIs and services.
That's amazing. I mean, essentially, you know me, and you know that this is a part that very much impassions me, and I love that. I've been working with GraphQL for a very long time, and this is the problem that I consult on. And so the fact that Matt here is going to put my consulting business out of work because he's just going to solve it as part of his platform. No, but like that sounds amazing, and that sounds very cool, and like that really appeals to me. And so I promised Matt that I wouldn't take too long with him. He's moving house right now, and you're flying off to Europe tomorrow. And so he's kind of a very busy guy, being the CEO of Netlify. Also, I've been staring at my battery this whole time. My battery's about to die, so I don't want it to just cut off very awkwardly. So we're gonna say bye now. But it was an absolute pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, same. Absolute pleasure.
Kind of like hearing about the journey and kind of hearing about how you thought about all the things that essentially I've been using for all these years. And so that's been an absolute pleasure, and I hope you enjoyed it as well. Awesome.
Hope so as well.
See you next time.